welcome back to my channel. So as those of you who follow me on any kind of social media already know, I don't sleep. I have really bad insomnia, meaning that I'm often awake when I shouldn't be, looking at weird things on the internet that I shouldn't be. That sounded wrong. Not what I meant. I just get sucked into these holes, and when I'm not trying to impulsively buy a bunny on the internet at 3 in the morning, which has happened more times than I'd like to admit, I look into conspiracy theories. And I've been into conspiracy theories for a while. My dad is into them, a lot of my friends are into them, but over the past week and a half, I've just been I've had tunnel vision. I'm a wee bit obsessive just by nature, and I've completely submerged myself in the research of some of these theories. So for today's video, I thought that I would just run through some of the most ridiculously, insanely outrageous ones that I have come across, and I don't think any of these are new. I'm actually very sure that they've all been discussed on YouTube before. Other creators do this all the time. I'm not trying to take credit for other people's work. This is just my little pile of conspiracy theory research and interpretation. So yeah, that's what we're doing today. Fair warning, I am going to get pretty heated throughout this video because one, my mind just doesn't work anymore. These are all just so insane. Also, I'm really caffeinated, and just put caffeine, Haley, and groundbreaking theories together, and it's gonna be an interesting ride. So let's just dive in to the conspiracy, shall we? We shall. Already with the caffeine. So the first conspiracy theory that I need to talk about is called the Mandela effect. Now, I had only originally heard of one of these, the Berenstain Bears one, which blew my mind just by itself. But then after an embarrassingly large amount of research, it's so much bigger. Basically, it's this phenomenon where massive amounts of people remember something a certain way, and they're extremely certain about it, and then they're just completely wrong. And it was just never a thing. And it was called the Mandela effect because supposedly, thousands of people remember Nelson Mandela, this guy, and no, that's not Morgan Freeman, dying in prison years ago, but that never happened. And it was so many people. It's not like they just didn't know. Thousands of people vividly remember something that did not happen. Now, there are lots of theories explaining this kind of thing. The most popular one, I think, is time travel and the butterfly effect. Somebody went back in time, stepped on a bug, and now Nelson Mandela is fine. And I'm not saying that I believe that. I don't think that that is necessarily what is going on, but something is happening. Because let me just explode your brain a little bit with some more examples of the Mandela effect. Okay, so the Berenstain Bears, and this is the first example that I ever came across, but the Berenstain Bears were these kids' books that were pretty popular around the time that I was growing up, maybe even before then. There was a TV show too, which I will admit to watching way beyond the age that it would have been okay to watch. I also watched Dragon Tales until I was 15, and I don't know why I admitted that to the internet, but not the point. They were relatively well known, and this might not freak you out as much as it freaked me out if you weren't extremely familiar with these books growing up, or if you don't really remember them. But really quickly, in your mind, how do you spell Berenstain? B-E-A-R-S-T-E-I-N. S-T-I-E-N-E-I-N. Oh, this is not good. E-I-N, with an E. You spell Berenstain Bears with an E, right? No, there's an A. It's spelled with an A. S-T-A-I-N, Berenstain. And I'm sorry, but what? And there was a weird period of time where this blew up online because so many people were certain, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that the Berenstain Bears was spelled with an E, not an A, myself included, that were just really freaked out when they looked back at their books and realized that it was spelled with an A. And it was such a big deal for a while that there's actually volumes of material on the internet about this whole theory. And just to quickly combat the idea that this amount of people mispronounce it or just don't remember, there's a reason that people are so certain about this, and a lot of that certainty has to do with the fact that we use those books to learn how to read and just... And it's not just the Berenstain Bears and the Nelson Mandela thing. There's so many other examples, the Snow White one, and this is just almost ridiculous. In Snow White, there is a very famous, iconic almost phrase that the evil stepmom says to the mirror. She walks up to the mirror over and over again and asks this same question. In your head, really quickly, did you think she said, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of them all?" Because I did, but no, she said, "Magic mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of them all." What? And then in Star Wars, when Darth Vader is telling Luke that he is his father, again, at the top of the most memorable cinematic phrases, he says, "Blank, I am your father." And I know I'm not the only person that was unbelievably certain certain that he said, "Luke, I am your father." My best friend, who had literally never even seen Star Wars, thought that it was "Luke, I am your father." Like, that phrase is just, again, iconic. Like, it's just something that everybody knows was said in this movie, but no, 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 no. He says, "No, I am your father." Are you kidding me? Like, "Luke, I am your father." People put that on t-shirts. Like, everybody knows that he says, "Luke, I am your father." It's just ridiculous to me. Okay, so this next conspiracy theory, I have been like such a nerd about. It's completely taken over my life over the past couple days. I spent 3 hours watching a documentary about this whole theory, which, by the way, I really, really hope isn't a thing. I'm so unbelievably hopeful that I am just delusional, because if it's true, it's just awful and like actually hurts my heart. And also, I'm not saying that I completely and totally believe in this conspiracy theory. I'm just presenting what I may or may not have spent 8.5 hours researching. I need a hobby. Basically, there is a conspiracy theory that the Titanic was sunk on purpose as an attempt to commit insurance fraud, but that the loss of life and the fact that it was as big of a tragedy as it was, that was an accident and happened only because the original plan fell apart. And I have so much to say about this. So, and just bear with me for a second while I get through some of the boring facts that I need to get through before I start talking about the crazy stuff that's gonna actually explode your brain, just so that it all makes sense. Just get cozy and settle in. White Star Lines was the company that made the Titanic, but before they made the Titanic, they made a virtually identical ship called the Olympic. And the Olympic just had horrible luck. It got into one wreck really, really early on with a tugboat, and then another much more serious wreck with a smaller ship called the Hawk. And this collision essentially totaled the Olympic, and for some reason, despite the fact that all the eyewitness accounts of the wreck said that it was the smaller ships, the Hawk's fault, the Olympic got blamed. So the Olympic's insurance wouldn't pay for the repairs, which was just a huge financial disaster for the White Star Lines, but they actually spent the time and money repairing the Olympic, even putting production of the Titanic on hold to do so, and then like right after, it ran over a shipwreck, messing up the propeller. It really was just an unlucky boat, but that put it back on the docks, essentially becoming a loss for the White Star Line. Even after we're trying to repair it as best as they could, it still had a ton of problems, including a list to port, which is just like fancy boat talk for lean to the left. The Olympic permanently would lean to the left, which was a very rare and problematic trait for a boat of that size to have at the time, so just keep that in your brain for later. Now, around this time, when it was becoming pretty apparent that the Olympic was just kind of done, it could be made to function barely, but it was never really going to be at the level of standard that it should have been, especially considering the amount of money that they had put towards it. During this time, the two virtually indistinguishable ships, the Titanic and the Olympic, were docked literally right next to each other in Belfast. And it's here, so the theory goes, that these ships were switched. Now, before I get into the evidence of this whole switch theory, and there is a lot of it, let me just quickly answer the question of why. Like, why in the world would a ship company do this? How does it make sense? First of all, it doesn't to normal, moral people that actually have hearts and souls. But basically, what the theory suggests is that if they were to switch the ships and send out the faulty but functioning Olympic as the Titanic, then the new, amazing, perfect, pristine ship that was actually the Titanic would be safe in the dock. Meaning that if something were to accidentally happen to the Titanic, which was actually the Olympic, then the White Star Lines would get an insurance payout for the brand new, amazing, perfect ship, when really they only lost the crappy one and had the perfect one safe back home, essentially saving the company from bankruptcy. Now, because these ships looked so similar, supposedly it would be extremely simple to make the swap. The differences were tiny. For example, the Titanic had 14 portholes, those really cute little circle windows that cartoon characters are always throwing up out of. The Titanic had 14 of those, and the Olympic had 16. However, mysteriously, when the Titanic launched, it had 16, and multiple survivors of the wreck, including this man whose name I forget, I'm so sorry, who was a science teacher, went on record noting that the Titanic very clearly leaned to the left, which, if you remember, was one of the things that was unique to the Olympic. And there's a lot more. I'm just kind of like glazing the surface of this whole thing, but on top of all of that, a lot of the A-lister passengers, the majority of whom were actually friends with the owner of the Titanic, who was supposedly in on all of this stuff, they canceled their trip at the last second. There were mass amounts of cancellations. before the ship like sailed, he had a bunch of his valuables taken off that he was meant to be transporting to America. Also, despite the fact that England at this time was having a really serious job crisis, people were out of work left and right. Thousands of people were looking for work, and at the time, working on a ship that was going to America was like a golden ticket. It was a very desirable job. The Titanic had an extremely hard time finding people to come on and sign up with them to just work on the ship, because supposedly there were rumors going around the shipyard from the people that had made the switch that the boats had been swapped, and that there was like this weird plan to sink the ship on purpose so nobody wanted to go on it. When the ship left, it was only about half full. Anyways, there was another White Star Line ship in the water when the Titanic hit the iceberg, which, by the way, there's like tons of evidence saying that that's just virtually impossible, that it could have accidentally hit an iceberg, with all of this science backing it up. It's historically proven to have been an extremely clear night, and there was records of the iceberg being spotted. It would have been extremely difficult to accidentally hit this iceberg, and that the Titanic, even if it turned at the last second, had plenty of time. Like, there was just, it was very odd, yada yada yada. But there was another ship owned by the same people called the Californian that sailed out into the ice field, stopped, and waited. And this is like what really got me, because the Californian was a passenger ship, but it had no passengers. It was completely empty except for a cargo of blankets and sweaters. Oh, my brain. What was supposed to happen, according to the theory, was the Titanic was supposed to hit the iceberg and start to sink slowly. The Californian, who was supposed to be within eyesight, would have easily enough time to come over and rescue everybody off of the ship. The Titanic, which was actually the Olympic, would sink harmlessly, and then the insurance money would come and save the White Star Line. However, the communications officer on the Californian, according to the theory, fell asleep, and there's like weird records and testimony confirming that that is what happened. And there was a third boat out there that night, which wasn't supposed to be. It was the Samson. It was an illegal fishing ship. Anyways, as far as I understand, this caused the Titanic to be 3 miles off of course, but both the Californian and the Titanic could see the Samson, which was right in between the two of them, and each of them thought that it was each other. So the Californian thought that it could see the Titanic, but really it was the Samson, and the Titanic thought it could see the Californian, but again it was the Samson, because the Samson was like right in the middle. So when the Titanic started to sink, and apparently at first nobody was freaking out, they were sending the very few lifeboats that they had out less than half full. I don't even think, although I can't completely remember, but I don't think a distress call was sent out for like over an hour, because they were expecting the ship that they saw, which they assumed was the Californian, to come sail over and save them as simply as the plan had designed. But it never did, because it wasn't the Californian, it was the Samson, and the Californian couldn't see them, and the Californian communications officer was asleep, so they had no idea what was going on. Oh, then there was like a bunch of really sketchy stuff that happened afterwards. After the plan had basically failed, the company was like scrambling to cover it up. When the survivors were brought back, the remainder of the crew was like herded into a weird like shed room instead of being allowed to go home, and they were held there for like an hour before being made to sign pieces of paper and then finally being let go. Like, it was just very weird, sketchy stuff. And after such a big tragedy, there's what's called an official inquiry, which was equally as shady, and there's like a bunch of conspiracy theories about how the government actually found out about what this ship company did, but instead of like exposing them, they helped them cover it up purely so that they would be able to use their boats in the war that was about to come, because this was all happening like right before World War I, so they wanted access to the White Star Line ships. So the government helped cover up this whole thing so that the company wouldn't be disbanded. It was just, oh, there's so much more, but I'm gonna stop here because my brain just can't. Oh, like I said, I really, really hope that this wasn't a thing, because the accidental loss of the Titanic was tragic enough. Like, over 1,500 people died. And if that was actually caused by greed and just insurance fraud, I mean, it really leaves a stain on humanity. Oh, my head. Alright, that is it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, let me know down below in the comments. Also, make sure to like and subscribe if you're new. And if you want to see more videos like this, you guys have no idea. I have so many other conspiracy theories just ready to go. With all of that said, I love you guys to the moon and back, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!